Jalan, Dr. Y.V. Reddy, Dr. Kirit Parikh, Dr. Nachne, Dr. Mahendra Dev, distinguished invitees. It gives me indeed very great pleasure to be in your midst this morning as we celebrate the Silver Jubilee of the Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research. Completion of 20 years, 5 years, is an important landmark in the history of any institution. It is all the more so in the case of a research institution. As one was associated with the founding of this institution, I take great pride in the achievements of IGIDR. It has emerged as a leading institution of research and teaching in economics, not only in India, but in this part of the world. We can legitimately be proud of what IGIDR has done in the last 25 years. We must thank successive governors and successive directors of the Institute for achieving this level of excellence. The idea of setting up an Institute of Economic Research originated in the mid-1980s. That was a time when we were thinking of how to commemorate the Golden Jubilee of the Reserve Bank of India. Among the various ideas, one of the important ideas that caught our attention was to set up an institution of economic research in Mumbai. It was felt that apart from the Department of Economics in Bombay University, there was no other institution in Mumbai devoted to economic research. At that time, Dr. Manmohan Singh was governor. But I must say that at that point, it was only just a thought. The idea took a concrete shape later, when Malhotra became the governor, and when I continued to be the deputy governor in charge of the economic department. There were three important ideas at that time we had in mind while setting up the institution. In some ways, Dr. Subbarao mentioned them, but I think I would sort of repeat them because these 3 or 4 ideas were there right from the beginning of the evolution of the idea. First was the point that has been made, that we wanted to set up an institution devoted to economic research as an autonomous body, not directly under the umbrella of the Reserve Bank. We had many other institutions of training directly under the umbrella of the Reserve Bank, but we felt that this institution, which we are setting up, would be fully funded by the Reserve Bank of India, but will function autonomously outside the Reserve Bank. In these days of financial difficulties and so on, you must recognize how important it was to have an institution which is fully funded by the Reserve Bank or by any other institution. I happen to be the chairman of many other institutions, economic institutions now, and I don't know how difficult it is to run them because one of the problems is a budget constraint. Now, in some ways, yes, there is supervision by the Reserve Bank of India, but nevertheless, there is the assurance as far as the institute is concerned that it will be funded once approved by the Reserve Bank. Therefore, first, the main thing, that the autonomous character of the institution. The second, the point which was also emphasized, that we felt that the new institution would focus on development as a theme rather than money and finance with which the Reserve Bank of India was closely associated. In fact, I must tell you, there was a lot of debate on that before we came to this conclusion, because many people within the Reserve Bank also felt that any institution that we set up should be in some way or other feed the Reserve Bank of India, should some way or the other help Reserve Bank of India in its own activities. But we took the decision at that time that it will be an institution devoted to development in all its dimensions, not only economic, but also social, sociological, technological, and so on. And therefore, the focus of that institution will be development. Third, we in India are not fully aware of the various developments that occur in the rest of the world, more particularly in the rest of Asia. Even our interpretation of the performance of the Asian tigers, as they were called at that time, were filtered through the Western analysis. One of the ideas that was in the original objectives put before the board of the Reserve Bank of India also contains this, namely that we should have scholars from the rest of Asia coming here, and we should also work and study the development experience of the countries in South Asia and East Asia. But anyway, all these ideas are dynamic in nature. They evolve as we go along. But if you look at the memorandum submitted to the board of the Reserve Bank, and if you look at the memorandum of association of the society, which was registered to set up this institute, all these objectives would be have been spelled out. Having taken the idea, having taken the decision to set up an institute, there were two important things. One was to have the appropriate physical. I must say that I literally walked from one end of this road to the film city to find out the appropriate place for the location of this institute. And I finally chose this particular place. It is like a mound, and therefore we chose this particular place. And the Maharashtra government was quite cooperative, and they gave us this place. But I must also say that Mr. Malhotra took a keen interest in the construction of the building. While I was looking after the intellectual part of the institute, he was particular about the way that the building is designed. And if I remember right, I do not know whether things have changed, but the building still belonged to the Reserve Bank of India. I suppose so, is it? I think. So the way it was designed was that the Reserve Bank of India will construct this and give it to the Indira Gandhi Institute, and therefore that was the way it was done. And I think we took an extraordinary care to build this institution. And therefore, while thanking all the people, you must also thank it's called the premises department of the Reserve Bank of India also for the excellent work they did. The second and the more important thing was the search for the first director. The intellectual content of the institute is the most important thing. And we were indeed very fortunate to have Dr. Kirit Parikh come as the first director. His academic credentials were excellent, internationally recognized economist. He was willing to come to India, and he was willing to shoulder the responsibility of setting up this institute. And therefore, on this occasion, I must pay my tribute and my gratitude to Dr. Kirit Parikh for accepting our invitation to be with us. And the work has been carried on by successive directors. I must also say one thing. The original idea was to name the institution as the Jawaharlal Nehru Institute of Development Research. We had approached the government to name it as Jawaharlal Nehru Institute of Development Research. because any institution to be named after Jawaharlal Nehru has to have the approval of the government. But what happened was that in the meanwhile, before the setting up of the institute, Indira Gandhi died, and therefore it has to be changed, and then it was named as the Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research. As Mahendra Dev mentioned, and as Dr. Subbarao mentioned, the institute has grown strongly. Its research output has been recognized as being of a very high order, and the research output has been in many fields, many disciplines associated with economics. But we also felt at that time that teaching also should be part of the institute. It is mentioned in the memorandum, but it was not given high priority to start with. But as we moved along, we recognized that teaching is equally important. In fact, at the advanced level, a good teacher is one who is also a good researcher. As the saying goes, it is only a lighted candle that can light another candle. And therefore, only one who is learning and doing research can be a good teacher. But of course, it is not always true that good researchers always turn out to be good teachers. We cannot assure that. And I have known and studied under Nobel laureates who went on writing on the blackboards without really spelling out anything. And all that the students did was to very carefully take down everything that was written on the blackboard and later on go and study what is implicit in that. Therefore, it is not necessary that good researchers also turn out to be good teachers, but I do believe that a good teacher is also a good researcher. And therefore, teaching was also added to the work of the institute. And initially, we started with the PhD students. We had problems also with the Bombay University because of the strict regulations they had. But finally, we had the master's program, for which I pushed very hard at one time. And I'm very happy that it has gained a great recognition. And the students who pass out of the Indira Gandhi Institute are regarded as being among the very best in the country. Well, as Mr. Subbarao mentioned, there have been many committees, including, most importantly, the Bimal Jalan Committee, which reviewed the working of the institute. I'm happy to know that the recommendations made by that committee are being implemented. But one thing I do want to stress, which comes out of Dr. Jalan's committee report also, and that is the institutions, academic institutions which have flourished are those which have a great element of inner democracy. It's only where the faculty involvement and participation in the affairs of the institute, both academic as well as non-academic, is great, then the institutions grow. And therefore, I do hope that IGIDR will continue to preserve this important element, namely the active and serious involvement of the faculty. There are many things that need to be done. Mr. Subbarao mentioned some of the areas in which IGIDR must continue to do work. I will not go into that. But I want to mention only two things. I want IGIDR to consider whether they can introduce a 5-year integrated program of masters in economics. I feel that the undergraduate education in economics is also not that good. And there are very few institutions in India which specialize or which put some emphasis on the bachelor's degree in economics. Therefore, I would plead before the governing council of IGIDR to give serious thought to the idea of an integrated master's program, train people from the time they pass out of the 12th standard. And I think there are examples of this. They have not been very successful, but they have been somewhat successful. IIT Chennai experimented with it, but didn't carry it through. But IIT Kanpur has. Therefore, there are examples, and I would, the possibility of people taking their bachelor's degree and getting out at the end of 3 years is also built into it. The second, apart from the various issues that Mr. Subbarao mentioned, I would also say that we should go back to one of the objectives enshrined in the original memorandum, namely to pay attention and to look more closely at the development experience of our neighbors, and more particularly in East Asia. I say this because we are living in a highly integrated world. Globalization has its own advantages, sometimes disadvantages. It cuts both ways. We share prosperity and visitors. More recently, India has entered into free trade agreement. First initially with Thailand, and later on with ASEAN. And now we are talking about ASEAN Plus. And when we were evaluating the consequences of entering into an FTA with Thailand or with the ASEAN or ASEAN Plus, which is now on the table, we found that we had very little to draw upon from Indian economists. And there is very little work that is going on. And we had to make ad hoc arrangements in order to be able to assess the implementation of such an idea. Therefore, I would still say that it is time to see whether we can, in the emerging world, to look at the development experiences of other countries, particularly in Asia. I do not want to take any more time. Economics as a discipline is evolving. Economic wisdom is not the monopoly of any country. This is revealed by the recent experience. Indian economists are leaders in the field of economics, several of them. But we need more of them who can become leaders in economics, who can contribute to policy making, and who can, and to theory, drawing from our own experience. I'm sure that IGIDR will be able to fulfill its role in this endeavor. And I'm also confident that the next 25 years of IGIDR will be as exciting as the first 25 years. I wish IGIDR all success in its efforts. Thank you.